You look like you're lagging a little bit. I don't know what happened to the audio. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
There we there we go. All right, here we are. My computer just my computer was like, "Hey, we've got 10 seconds left. Let's glitch."
I know we were talking right before this, right? And everything was perfect. That's Murphy's Law, but that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I started the countdown and then it started glitching. Then I don't know, it just wanted to break. I don't know what's going on. But here we are. We made it. I'm excited. Thank you so much for being here. To all the viewers, to my guest Walt. I just want to let you guys know that this is the Cope Life podcast, and I'm so excited to be here. And when I talk about a Cope life, what I'm talking about is living a life in which every single day you bring kindness, optimism, positivity, and empathy. Bring it to every situation, right? So that what you can do is you have a framework to choose your response in any situation. And really, that's what we want, right? We want to be in control of our situations, be in control of our perspective, our attitude. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk with Walt McKinley, and we're going to find out about how he dealt with some situations that maybe applying a cope life was a little difficult. And so, with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Walt. Walt, please just tell us who you are, tell us what you're about.
Yeah. So first of all, Charleston, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate you, brother. Especially another veteran doing big things, and I love the idea of what the Cope Life podcast is, because really mental health is struggling in our world right now. So anytime we can bring those skills to the table and bring these inspirational stories to people to let them know their history doesn't define their legacy and where they start doesn't have to be where they finish. I'm game every single time. And so a little bit about me. So my name is Walt McKinley. I am have been married 22 years. I always like to start with my family, not my profession. Been married 22 years with my wife 25. I've got two amazing teenage daughters. That one's a freshman in high school, one's a senior. They keep me on my toes, but they're just amazing young women, and I can't wait to see where life takes them. And so but I'm a former naval intelligence officer, so I did 20 years in the military and retired. Went into corporate America for the last 5 years. Did really well there, but was just left with a empty feeling, and really some self reflection about what I was doing. And we'll get into my story obviously here pretty soon, and it'll kind of all make sense. But about 9 months ago, I from the outside looking in, people would say, "Wow, Walt, you're really successful. You have everything. You have a house, a marriage, kids. You have toys. You have money." But I was miserable inside. I was miserable inside and living in quiet desperation because I wasn't aligned with my life's purpose. And I heard a quote the other day, and somebody said, they said Steve Harvey said it. They said the two best days of your life is the day you were born and the day you find out what your purpose is. And in those moments of struggle, in those moments of uncertainty and that quiet desperation, I had to do some reflection and found my life's purpose is really to share my story of just horrific and torturous abuse that I went through, but not from a just a traumatic perspective, really from the perspective of the triumph that happens afterwards, from the tools and the skills and the things that I did innately, not even knowing what I was doing in my healing journey, that have got me to the point of being super happy, and just now stepping into this life's purpose of helping others overcome their traumatic past, giving them the keys to live an extraordinary life, and then also still doing consulting on how to build high performing team first cultures and organizations. So it's amazing how the two skill sets are very different, but they all align to help me step into my purpose and what I'm doing today.
I love it. I love it. I love it so much because part of what you said was that I mean, obviously you were in the Navy for 20 years. I can appreciate that. I spent 20 years in the Air Force and I spent 3 years on a Navy base. So I saw how it worked. I saw how it worked. And it's interesting. I'll say that. But I'll say this. You said that, 20 years in the Navy, 5 years in corporate America, you were successful. However, it didn't align with your purpose. And that reminds me of a quote by Dr. Viktor Frankl. Dr. Viktor Frankl wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, and he wrote the book after being liberated from Auschwitz after he spent 5 years in a Nazi concentration camp. And one thing that he said was that more and more people have the means to live than the meaning to live for.
Yeah.
And that just reminds me of what you said. That's exactly it. Finding your purpose. Well, I'm familiar with your story because I mean the reason we're here, part of the reason we're here is because I've heard you tell bits and pieces of your story in different places. And I'm so glad we connected. Facebook, I think a
Yeah.
WhatsApp group, Clubhouse. I'm loving it. I'm loving this connection. And so the question I'm about to ask you, I gotta let you know, you can take as long as you want to answer it.
Gotcha.
and and we're scheduled for an hour, but it's a Friday and I got time. If we go over, I'm okay with
All
that
right.
too.
That's
But
good.
one thing I don't want to do is deny people whatever you want to offer right now. So my question for you is really starting from wherever you want to start, how did you get to where you are now?
Man, it's been a journey. I feel like I've lived 10 lifetimes in my life. And, really my journey is something that nightmares are made from, and that movies are made of. As a matter of fact, my memoir, Monsters in My House, that I'm getting ready to release. I'm also working with some people who have connections in Hollywood, and I'm trying to make some on my own too, to get this memoir made into a movie. And so, I spent the first 14 or sorry, I moved 14 times in the first 16 years of my life, being bounced around from one parent to the other, sometimes being kidnapped in the middle of the school day and moved to another part of the state, or maybe even moved to a whole different state, for the first 16 years I was alive. And during that time, whether I was with my mother and stepfather, whether I was with my father and stepmother, or whether I was with foster parents, I was extremely abused by every single adult that I came into contact with. And not just kick, slaps, punch, belittle, demean, those kind of things, neglected, things like being thrown into basements, and chained to beds, and really, thrown against walls, and pictures breaking on my head. There's really horrific and torturous things that have happened to me. But my story, that's only gotten me to be the man I am today. And I'm going to tell a couple little pieces of this story for all the viewers out there to kind of really help you connect with this journey of healing that I've been on my whole life, and that I'll continue to be on the rest of my life, because we're always evolving, or we should be. Because if you're stagnant, you're declining, in my opinion. And so, there's some really pinnacle moments in my life where spiritually for me, I felt the presence of God. And one of those moments was when I was 8 years old, locked in a basement. That was kind of my punishment during that time frame. If the extreme version of it, if I wasn't being kicked, slapped, or punched around. And I remember my stepfather used to hold this mask up. It was a werewolf mask. I was terrified of. And so think at 8 years old, you're running to jump onto your bed, right? Because you're just in those moments, like you're just afraid something might grab your feet, the monster under your bed. But in those moments that he threw the mask down there with me, that mask became full of life. It became a werewolf that was alive in the dark, dank, cold basement in Indiana. And in those moments, I remember standing up and looking up, and the picture, the cover on my book is this view of myself as a little boy, seeing the silhouette of him and the light shining from behind him, and only the dark silhouette. And then also having this mask. So in those moments, I really had to choose between two monsters, one at the top of the stairs and one at the bottom. And I'll never forget sitting there, and I got my arms around my knees. Well, initially I'm screaming and I'm crying and I'm trying to get out, but the door's locked. I can't get out. And I know if I bang on the door, he's going to come down there and hit me, or push me down the stairs, potentially, and hurt me. So sitting on the basement floor, like I remember the concrete walls and just how cold it was, and sitting there in my pajamas in this one moment and rocking back and forth. I didn't have any screams anymore. I didn't even have any tears anymore. I was really just a whimpering lump of humanity sitting in the corner where something couldn't attack me from behind, but hearing in my imagination this werewolf tapping nails on the concrete floor in that basement. And in that moment, in my deepest, darkest point of despair, where I think that I was going to literally lose my humanity and my any mental anything that I had left, I felt a warmth come over me, and peace come over me. And I didn't know it then. We never went to church growing up. I didn't know what church was, but I know now as an adult, like that was for me the presence of God in that moment. That really kept my sanity. It truly kept my sanity. And so fast forward, a lot's happening. We're back and forth between parents, literally being kidnapped in the middle of the school day. And when I say that, I'm not joking. My dad shows up. I hadn't seen him in years. I didn't even know who he was. Picks us up in the middle of the school day. The principal tells me he's verified it's my father, and we leave. And I'll never forget my mother running across the parking lot because she found out he was there, and she couldn't do anything. Run across the parking lot. We're speeding away in a car, and I'm looking out the back window with my hand on it. Just this little boy that's confused and doesn't know what's happening. Meanwhile, I really don't know I'm going back to live with my stepfather, who's going to continue the abusive cycle my father was already in. So when I was 13 years old, I was really at a point of extraordinary despair in my life. This culmination of this horrific abuse, but not only that, just the emotional and mental abuse I was getting all the time. 13 years old, my dad's girlfriend at the time, I'm back with him now. My dad's girlfriend at the time, they're going to go to Disneyland. Now, you guys got to understand it. We were broke. We didn't have money for food. Sometimes the only food I ate was at school. And I was lucky that it was that and it wasn't in the middle of summer. And they're talking about going to Disneyland, right? From Yuma back to Anaheim, California. And I'm excited. I'm sitting there listening. And I'm like, we can't even eat half the time. I don't know how the heck we're going to Disneyland, but we're about to go. Yes, let's go. And she leaves and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, we're going to go on Thursday. It's okay. I don't have basketball practice on Friday. And I'm just excited to go. And my dad looks at me and he says, I love her and not you. So why would I take you? You're staying here. And I remember in that moment, I felt devastated. It was like I hadn't seen my mom in 4 or 5 years at this point. So there's one parent missing. My other parents, I don't feel loved. My other parents telling me that I'm not important enough to go. I don't matter. And so, it's these deep rooted emotions that I'm dealing with at the same time. And I almost took my life that weekend. And my dad takes off with his girlfriend, and I'm at 13, but at home by myself. And he threatens to kill me if I tell any of my family that live in the town that I'm home by myself. And that I wrote a suicide note to them that weekend. And I was so angry, Charleston. I was so angry. Like, I want them to feel what I'm feeling. Like, I want to cause them the pain that they've caused me. That's how I felt in that moment. And I'm, getting riled up to give myself the courage to actually take my life. And finally, I grab the knife and I go in the bathroom. And still to this day, I don't know why I turned the water on in the bathroom sink, or frankly, even why I went in there. And I go to put the knife into my wrist and kill myself. And it was like I was paralyzed in the moment. As soon as I started doing it, my body shut down. I couldn't move, literally couldn't move. And I'm just standing there, and I can't do anything. And I feel that same warm feeling come over me, and I feel something grab my wrist and pull my arm away, pull the knife away. And it was like it shook my wrist, and I couldn't hold the knife. I dropped it. And I had this feeling of like floating, going out to the living room most. And this feeling of weird peace that I go from this crazed emotion of hate and pain and shame and despair and all these things that I felt. And I'm in the living room, and I still can picture it today in my mind. And it wasn't even like I closed my eyes. I could just see it. It was like a shield came over me, and it was like these layers of golden armor came over me. And I say layers, it was like layered. Each piece of it was like tucked under the next. And I needed that armor to survive, bro, for the next 2.5 years, because I wouldn't have made it without it. And I didn't take my life, thank God, right? Because God was getting ready to use me for the purpose of what I'm doing right now. And and we move a couple different times, but I'm still with my dad at this point. And at 15 and a half, my 24-year-old aunt, now mind you, she's newly married, has a small baby. I think my cousin was maybe 1, maybe 2, right? Newly married. She's 24 years old, trying to figure out life. She doesn't have a lot of money. She starts coming and picking me up because she can't take knowing what's happening to me. She just starts showing up to the apartment. and starts making up stories. I'm going to take Brent to the circus. I'm going to go do this with Brent. I thought Walt might want to go. And my dad used to say, get him the F out of here. I don't want to see his face anyway. And she would just pick me up. And that was the first taste of love that I've ever had in my life. I'm 15 and a half at this point. And in this pit of despair that I'm in, and this darkness that I'm in, and I'm living in this turmoil that I'm living in every single day, it was like that lone, like ray of light shining down. And it's like, you can stand under it, and it's warm, and it feels good, and it gives you hope. Like, it really gives you hope in those moments. And my dad didn't know what she was doing, because anybody that tried to help, he would threaten to have them arrested, and he would have done it. He would have genuinely done it. I haven't seen my mom at this point for like 6 years. I don't even know where she's at. Literally no contact. And my aunt files a case with CPS. Now, Charleston, I'm 45, so this is 30 years ago. So back in the day, CPS still struggles now, right? But back in the day, it was even more dysfunctional than it even is now. And CPS tells my aunt, well, he has to get hit one more time before, since you filed the case now. And so she comes over and she kind of takes me to lunch or whatever. I don't even really remember what we did, but get me out of the house as she normally did. And she's crying and she's like, I'm so sorry. We can't do anything till he hits you again. But I want you to listen to me. When he does it, I just want you to run. Run as fast as you can. And I'm like, oh, and she's like, and they said CPS is supposed to do a health and welfare check sometime this week. And I'm panicked because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if they do a health and welfare check, he's going to kill me because he's going to know I told. And thank God I didn't have to wait. I had to wait 2 days from that moment before he hit me again. And he punched me in my head in front of 5 of my friends. And most of the time it was behind closed doors when nobody could see. And he's drunk and he's raging. And he comes marching down the street. And all this is in my book. And he comes marching down the street and he punches me in my head because I'm not sitting on the apartment steps. And I'll never forget, he knocks the hat sideways. And I'm like, Dad, I was coming to get my hat because one of the girls was flirting with me and took my hat. And I chased her, right? And he punches me in my head again and my hat falls off my head. And in that moment, it's like, I never forget kneeling down. And the asphalt from the Arizona heat is hot still, even though it's early evening. It's hot from that 110 degrees in the summer. And my knee, and I remember never forget my hand, and got one hand on the ground, another hand on my hat. My knee, it's like I'm in a sprinter position almost. And I could feel the heat from the ground. I'm looking at him, and I could see this just snarl and this evil look on his face. And in that moment, I could hear her run, 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 run. And my friends are looking at me. They're astonished. Nobody's saying anything. They're just like, and, almost at this point, 16 years, like 15 years and 9 months, maybe somewhere around there, almost 16 years of just abuse and emotion and rage and shame and despair and all these things come to the surface. And I take off running. For the first time in my life, my flight mode didn't make me freeze. My flight mode made me run. And I run. I just take off running. I can hear him behind me. Boy, you better get over here. 1, 2. He was in the Army, so even though he was a big man, he still had a very loud, booming voice. 1, 2. And in my imagination, he's right on me, right? So, I tell you what, not to make light of it, but Usain Bolt could have caught me on that day. The fear and the energy and the pain, and it just propelled me forward. And me and my friends take off running. And this apartments, it's like, I don't know, like 6 or 7 different buildings consecutive, right? And my friend lived like 2 over from where I lived at. And so we start backtracking and make our way around to the house. Or his apartment, I should say. And I could hear my dad yelling my name in the apartments looking for me. And so we're hiding behind cars and we're hiding behind trees. Like, I'm terrified we're going to turn a corner. He's going to be right there. Even though you can hear his voice far away, but it's this fear that you have inside. We get in the house, we lock the door, call my aunt. She's like, don't move and don't answer the door until the cops get there. What apartment are you in? And we told her. And, about 20 minutes later, 15, 20 minutes later, you know, Yuma Police Department, Walt McKinley, are you in there? We open the door and it's the police. And she's driving from like 35, 40 minutes away to get there as fast as she can. And I want to stop here for a second, just in case you have questions, but we'll continue what the comeback looks like here in a second. So all of these moments, and this moment when the cops arrest my father, and I'm bawling, I'm a mess, and I feel horrible. My dad's getting arrested, and he's getting pushed into the cop car, and he's like, "I hope your friends were worth it, boy. I hope you're happy now, boy." And on one hand, I was happy. On one hand, I was happy he was going to get what he deserved too. On the other hand, I was devastated because even though my father, was horrific to live with, he was in pain from, being molested by a man at 16 years old that groomed boys in their neighborhood. Like there were things that he never resolved and rectified and dealt with that made him hate himself and made him live in shame and anger and despair. And he continued that generational cycle of abuse. And so this moment, this night is, I'm not joking you, Charleston. It is literally the turning point of my whole entire life. And there's more to share after this, but I'm going to stop here in case you got some questions for me.
Well, your story's incredible. Your story's incredible. And when I hear stories like yours, first of all, I don't know how the average interviewer or podcast host, I don't know how they do what they do, but man, I feel your words.
Thank you.
Like I feel it when I hear stories about anything happening to children. Like it's painful for me. I'll tell you a quick story where I was in this class. I was a sexual assault victim advocate for the Air Force, and we had a guest speaker in our training course, and she worked at the shelter, and she was talking about things that happen to children, and I had to take a break.
Yeah.
Whereas, so now I'm hearing about you, and you're not like children. You're not someone else's story. This is your story.
Yeah.
And so it's on a different level. But I do have some questions. First of all, so you brought up friends, right? You brought up, you were on the steps or whatever with your friends. How did you manage your, I want to say, your image or whatever at school, and how did you manage to hide this? I mean, I know you weren't at school telling everybody all the time. So how did you even manage that aspect of life?
It's wild to think back on it. So when I wrote the book, I take you into like when I'm playing with my GI Joes and I can hear my stepfather coming down the hall in the 10 steps. And that's in the book teaser at themonstersinmyhouse.com. But the whole book is written in a way that not only helps you understand the emotions that I was going through, but it paints the picture. So I'm happy that you said you could feel that, like you could maybe even put yourself like we're in that situation. And for me, I just wore a mask, and I can't tell you even how many adults I met today that are still wearing that mask from the pain that they had as children into their adulthood. And so for me as a child, I mean, honestly, every time I moved, I had to go to a different school. Sometimes it's across town to another apartment. Like I said, sometimes with the other parent, sometimes it's different states. So I'm moving schools every single time. So I had the ability to almost be like a chameleon, and almost just I had to adapt. What choice did I have? And I can think back. I would get made fun of. I used to have a big gap in between my teeth I have it filled now, but I used to have a big gap in between my teeth. I have a pudgy nose. So kids would make fun of me. I was poor, so I had holes in my clothes. I didn't have no name brand shoes. I wore the Pro Wings or XJ 900s from Payless, and kids would make fun of me and I got bullied, and I just kept moving forward. It didn't matter if it was an inch or a mile of a step. I just kept moving forward. And so my peace that I found, though, was never in my home. My peace I found was with friends. My peace I found was outside. And those were the moments when I felt more alive. And so I craved those moments more. And so anytime I got in that scene, I even though I was hurting inside and my soul was just eroding piece by piece, you would have never known from the outside. I was this boisterous, happy kid that that struggled when he was by himself. And so friends were my peace. Friends were what kept me alive in those moments. My sister, for the first 10 years of my life, we were together. Without her, I wouldn't have kept my sanity. And then we split apart because she ran with my mother. If we think my story is crazy, her story is even crazier, and she's doing amazing today, which I love. She ran with my mother, and I was so terrified of my dad, I didn't go. So that one person that I had for those first 10 years of my life, we separated. And we still have an amazing relationship today. But the only thing I had at that point, I didn't have my sister anymore. I only had friends. And so, there were things I did, like remember 7th and 8th grade, hanging out with the stoner kids, and I'm starting to smoke cigarettes, and I'm stealing candy bars from the store because I could sell them for $1 at school. And if I sold, I don't know, 20 candy bars in a box, it's $20. And then I can go turn around and buy myself some food. So I'm doing things statistically I should have been doing, but I was just surviving in those moments. I've learned through my healing journey how to actually thrive because of what I went through, and be thankful for the trauma I went through, because it's created me and this person I am today, and unlock these superpowers and gifts. And we can talk about those in a bit. Unlock these superpowers and gifts where now I can help other people move past their own trauma too. And I couldn't have done that without my past.
Wow, that's crazy. I think about, we talk about surviving, because there comes a point where people who have experienced trauma and are living through it, right? You didn't experience trauma like, oh, it happened once and now it's done. It's a part of your life. Just like, you're not thinking about, oh, what do I want to be when I grow up? What are my strengths and weaknesses? What do I love to do? You're like, can I just make it till tomorrow? And so I want to ask you one more question. And then after that, I want you to jump right into the next part of your story. But the question I have for you is, if you can kind of explain the difference between being hurt or sad and despair.
Yeah, I think to me, being hurt or sad, it emits some of the same emotions sometimes as somebody who's in despair, right? The lashing out or the withdrawing or those things. To me, the difference is I was hurt by my stepfather and my mother calling me Wilma because I was a scared little kid, right? I was scared and I was timid because of the stuff that happened to me. And I was always worried about getting hit and flinching, and if an adult kind of like moved too quickly towards me. And when they would call me Wilma, it would make me sad, because my name is Walt. And it would make me angry, and it would make me hurt, and it would make me feel ashamed. But to me, the difference between those moments and those moments that I was locked in basements and I was really hanging on to my sanity by a thin thread. That's the difference to me between being hurt and sad and despair. And we have challenges in life, even as adults, right? Like, even as adults, we have these challenges, and as adults, we have more of a choice to grow through them or go through them. But people's whole past and that inner child healing that they haven't done can take them immediately to despair on something that makes them sad, because it's not the thing that made them sad all the time. It's the thing that made them sad that reminds them of something that they haven't healed, that they haven't faced, because they're so fearful of this pain they might uncover. And it reminds me kind of like, you go through like a mountain tunnel, and it's curved, right? And you go into the tunnel and you're like, it's pitch black in here. Without these lights on the car, like, I'm gonna crash into the side of this mountain. But what happens when you keep going? You get around the corner and there's light. There's light. And when you go through those dark tunnels, and this is like what it's like going through that despair. You go through those dark tunnels and you keep moving, keep looking out the windshield, keep running towards that light, keep moving towards that light. When you step out in the light, it's bright. It's like, whoa, man, whoa, it's bright. Sunglasses out, right? And that's what it's like, healing from trauma. And your trauma could be a narcissistic relationship. It could be an accident you were in. It could be extreme childhood abuse like I went through. There's so many different types of trauma. It could be combat veterans coming back, and they're just afraid to go to those places and do that healing, and they got PTSD. But I know I've heard so many stories. My story, and the reason I share my story is to inspire people to know there is light on the other side of that tunnel, and they do matter. If you're listening, you do matter. You are loved, and you sure as hell deserve the abundance, and you deserve to step into that light that's waiting for you. But you have to have the courage to step through that pain in order to get through the light. So to me, like, it's that mindset that you get when you make those decisions and you take those steps forward. Even the smallest steps forward is still a step. And you take those steps forward and you believe through hearing other people's stories that there is light. And that action creates an emotion, and you get a result, and it's positive, and then your belief increases, and then you take another step, and then you get more results, positive results, and then you believe, and then you keep doing that, and all of a sudden you step out into the light that's bright, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been missing my whole life. So to me, that's really the difference between sadness and hurt and true despair. But I don't, whoever's listening to this, me too, right? Whoever's listening to this, you, me, anybody else, if you're here, you made it through 100% of those hurt, sad, or desperate moments that you thought you would never make it through. You made it. You're here. You're taking the steps. You just have to keep focused and continue to take those steps to step out into your light, and out of that darkness that we kind of keep hidden sometimes.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I love your response because it's so true, right? Because I've dealt with a lot of people. I have clients that are scared to take the next step, and I ask them, this next step, is this really the hardest or scariest thing you've ever done? And then that light actually comes back, and they're like, no, actually, I remember this pain. I remember this trauma. I remember when this happened to me. I'm like, okay, so then if you were abused like that, why is meditation scary? And for a lot of people, what it is when they go through like what you've gone through, or things that are not as bad as what you've gone through, but they're still traumatic, you have this sense of worthlessness, of failure, right? Like you can't get anything right. And so you feel that if you try something new and it doesn't work for you, it confirms that you're a failure.
Mm-hmm.
And so you mentioned having courage. You have to have the courage to do it. And what I like to tell people, honestly, is you can't have courage without fear. I mean, of all the things that you do that are easy, they don't take courage, right? Going to get breakfast, putting your shoes on, brushing your teeth, they're not courageous because there's nothing to fear.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at your fears for tomorrow and you think, well, like Walt, I was able to survive these actual real life dangers, then I can handle this thing tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you begin to do is you empower yourself to call up the light at the end of the tunnel whenever you need it, instead of just hoping it's there. Man.
Yeah, and it becomes rocket fuel, right? That's what people don't realize. It's like when you get that mode of empowerment, when you tell yourself, you know what, I'm so empathetic and full of resilience and grit and compassion, and I have this extreme level of initiative because of the things that I went through. It's really like unlocking superpowers, and it's rocket fuel for this life journey that we're on. And you just, ooh, like you don't let the fear stop you anymore. And half the time it's fear of judgment of other people.
Yes.
It's not even fear for yourself. And Charleston, you talked about that. I ask a lot of people, I'm like, think about all the things you were fearful of doing in life, things that stopped you. Think about the times that you actually still did it. Have you ever regretted one time of any of those? And they're like, oh my God, no, let me tell you about this time, right? They get lit up and they get so excited. And it's like in those moments, no, you don't regret any of it. Again, like you said, it empowered you to continue to do more things. And those hardest times in our life, whether it's super traumatic like I went through, or whether it's just tough times at work or relationships or whatever it is, if you choose to grow through those instead of going through them, if you think life happens for you and not to you, and you switch that mentality over to that, What you can do will transcend anything that you'll ever be by not ever having that switch turned on in your brain. So it really is a decision. And as much as people say it's not a decision, it is a decision that you make to run through that fear of the unknown and into your light, into your joy. And man, when you're doing that, it's like me stepping into my purpose. I was scared to leave corporate America. I got two teenage daughters. I'm married. My wife, because I was in the military, she has a degree, but she's always stayed at home. And the only reason I am what I am today is because her support and her holding down the house when I was on deployments and doing everything else. And so it's like, the power in moving forward together at the same time is so incredible. So, find your accountability partner in this too. Find a Charleston who does coaching. Find me, find a best friend, find a trusted family member, find somebody to keep you accountable and keep you pushing through those tough times. They can't do it for you. You have to do it for yourself. But I promise you, not only is it a profound change in yourself and where you're going and your success and everything else, but it's just, it'll unlock this joy you don't even know you're missing. I didn't even know I was missing this like 15% of additional joy until I stepped into this purpose. But it took courage to do it. So it could be abuse. It could be leaving corporate America. All of it requires the decision and the belief to just take the step.
Yes, yes, definitely. I love it. I love it. Got to make decisions. Got to make
Yeah.
decisions. And when we think about making decisions, we often don't realize there's an option where you choose you.
Mm.
And that's what you did. And I love it. Even, back to your story, in the moment when you were looking up and you said, I was told to run, and you got up and ran, you chose you.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the foundation is the same. Like in this moment, I
Yes.
choose me. And so let's get back to it. Walt, I love your story. And so what happened after that? Because at some point in time after that, you decided, let me join the Navy. At some point in time after that, you did things like get married, have kids. I think we have 30 years left to cover.
Yes, we do.
Let's get on it, man. What's next after that?
Oh man, the comeback started, you guys, at this moment that I ran. And my aunt took me into her home. And if you met my aunt, you would be like, oh my gosh, that's the female version of you. I'm so much like she is, because in those moments, all I needed was love and it's for someone to be my champion. So literally, my life was saved through love because one person, and by the way, she's the youngest sister of 8, one person had the courage, made the decision to just love on this broken 15-and-a-half-year-old teenager, in spite of her own family just starting off. And my dad was her oldest brother. So 6 months, well, maybe like 4 months after I moved in with her. So I had to go testify against my father in court. This was the first day in my life that I really was able to take a literal stand and defend myself. And the first day that I really stuck up for myself in a real way. So we're in the courtroom. My dad's testifying against. He's representing himself. Right. I have a state attorney. So the state attorney, my dad would start the courtroom, and he's like, "There's 6 of us, 5 of my friends and me." He goes, "I want all of them taken out. I want a sheriff to watch them out there so they don't collaborate and corroborate their stories, because they're all lying, and I'm going to prove it today." And so I'm pissed. Right now I'm sick. I just turned 16. I'm pissed. And we go out there, and the judge tells us not to talk to each other. So one by one, they call each of my friends in first. Now my dad's left-handed. So he thinks that he's going to get all of them to say he punched me with his right hand so that he can use that as his reason to say all these kids are lying. He gets in there, and my aunt's in the courtroom at the time. And she told me, just look at me if you get nervous. And he gets in there, and every kid, he's like, what hand did I hit them with? And she said each kid was like, kind of working through like like in their mind, like that moment, every single one of them said left hand. And so by the time I get up to the stand, my dad's frazzled. Like his whole defense for himself is ruined, right? And you can tell he's pissed. And as I'm walking to the stand, I could just feel his eyes burning a hole through me. Like he would have literally, I wrote it in the book, he would have literally buried me in the desert at that moment if he would have had a chance. And I get on the stand and, the state attorney asked me a couple questions and I'm crying on the stand at 16 because I'm just devastated, even though, when you're abused, sometimes you don't stop loving your parent, you stop loving yourself. And I'm testifying against my father. Like he's getting ready to cross-examine me, and I feel horrible that I'm going to put him in jail for felony child abuse. And they finish, and then it's his turn to ask me questions, and he starts asking me questions, and I'm answering the questions. And in the questioning, the judge says to him, "Mr. McKinley, if you talk to your son like that again, I'm going to hold you in contempt of court, and you'll go straight to jail." So he's like, "You're lying." And I'll never forget this moment. I kind of lean forward and I'm furious. I'm like, "You're lying." And it's like 16 years of anger. "You're lying. You hit me that night and you've been beating me." And you could tell it kind of shocked him. And he's like, "Boy, and boy, this, right?" And the judge goes, "You know what? I've heard enough. I've heard enough." And he goes, "If you treat your son like that in front of me in this entire courtroom, I can only imagine what you treat him like at home." And he looks over at me and he says, "Son, you did an amazing job. I've heard everything that I need to hear today. Go ahead and go back down by the Lord." So I go back down there and, I'll never forget. He goes, "The state of Arizona versus Walt McKinley, in the case of felony child abuse, I find you guilty." And I can't remember everything after that. I just remember that piece of it. And they said, and I remand custody to, I think remand was the word they used, and I remand custody to Diana. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like now she has full custody. I'm not a ward of the state." And I'll never forget. And I sat back in the chair and then I was like, "I'll never be hit again." And I was like, "I'm free. I'm free. I'm free." I felt like I was out of my entire life's purgatory in that moment. And I still get kind of emotional talking about that because it was not because of the trauma, but because of the feeling of just like being free and knowing I would never have to be abused again. And from that moment on, like my aunt just loved on me. Like I started playing basketball, lifting weights, and she's like, first time she saw me play basketball, she's like, "Okay, well, that's where some of his aggression is going to come out at." Right. And I'm lifting weights because I'm like, I want to be able to protect people. I couldn't protect myself, but I could protect people. And she just loved on me. And it wasn't like my healing process was linear at that point, right? I still had anger and I still had things I had to resolve. And, she'd go back and towards when I moved out of the house, she ran a produce cooler. So she would go from Salinas, where there's all kinds of produce, and then back to Yuma, and she would be kind of back and forth. And I had my own place, and I was chasing girls and the attention from girls, and I was drinking and lived in my car for a little while because I was too prideful. I just wanted to do it myself, and I was lashing out at other men. And like if you're a woman or child, like I would take a bullet for you because I wanted to protect people. But if you bullied somebody, I was going to bully you because I wanted you to know how that felt. And so I was bullying bullies and fighting people and getting crazy. And it culminated. And right before I went in the Navy, my buddy and I don't even know why we're going to do it till this day. We didn't even really need the money, but we cased a Circle K convenience store and we we're going to rob it. And we kind of set this whole plan in motion. I went in there and I cased it when there was an older guy working, and what time of day is it slow? And I'm just asking him questions. He's telling me everything that I need to know. And I'm like, okay, so we set out to rob it on a Wednesday because that was the slowest night at like 2 a.m. And we had guns, we had ski masks, and no kidding, the Monday before, his mother, he gets a phone call, and I can see his whole demeanor change when he's on the phone call. His mom's in the hospital, deathly ill. Now, this woman is still alive today, and she's awesome, and still living her best life. And this is when I talk about just even my own spiritual journey where God showed up in these moments. And I drop him off at a truck stop, and he hitchhikes home because it's about 5 hours away from where we lived at. I remember going back to the apartment. I sat there for a couple of days. I didn't have any. I didn't call any girls to come be around me. I didn't party with friends. I just sat by myself in the apartment and thought, what in the heck am I doing? Like I don't. I like we're stirring each other up, but I don't want to go to prison or get killed. Like this isn't what my life's supposed to be. And I called my grandma up, and she's like, why don't you come over? And I love my grandma to death. Like, still, I mean, she's passed away, but man, she was my hero, one of my heroes of my life too, besides my aunt. And go over to her house, and I'll never forget that wisdom, like that older wisdom that people just have, and she could just feel that I wasn't doing the right things. And I'm sitting on her porch, and I never forget, she had the little green turf on her little Arizona room, Florida room, whatever you want to call it. But since I'm from Arizona, it was Arizona. In her Arizona room, and it's, like 9 a.m. And so it's cooler outside still, and before the summer heat. And she grabs my hand, and she goes, there's nothing good for you here if you stay here. I just know. And she goes, do you need to go into the military like all your uncles did? All of my family has served at least a 2-year stint, right? One of my uncles had retired. She goes, you need to go in the military. And I just was like, I do need to do something. This ain't it. Like I'm gonna go to jail or get killed. And she was like, stay overnight. And my grandma, she'd bring me tea, and she'd make these little burritos. And she had those old little square Tupperwares that were like neon green or pink or whatever, like those old school things. And she brought me a burrito, and she's feeding me. And we're just kind of talking about life that night, and wake up the next morning, and she drives me to the recruiter station. Well, now I'm like, now my grandma is a tough old Irish woman, right? Short, but man, I already knew, like, I better sign up, because if I come back out here, out here, and I don't do this, and she drove me down here, what, she gonna march me right back in here by my ear and make me do it. So, I talked to the Navy recruiter, because my uncle was in the Navy. He retired. My grandfather, who had passed away at that point, he was in the Navy, and he retired. I'm like, we'll continue this tradition. And I'm like, I want to be an officer, and I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to do this. I had these big, audacious goals. I'm like, I just have to have something more in life than what I've had. And um, and within 2 weeks of that entry into that door, I had taken the ASVAB, and I was gone to boot camp. And I'll never forget being on the bus driving into Great Lakes, Illinois, because that was the only, in 96, they had just closed Orlando. So Great Lakes, Illinois, and thinking to myself, this is my chance to live the life I've always dreamed about. This is my chance to not survive, but thrive. This is my chance to never let anything that's happened to me happen to my family that I'm going to have one day. And I just ran with it from that point. And I wanted to mention one other story, because I think I meant to mention it before we almost robbed a store. About 6 months before we almost robbed the store, I'll never forget. I was living in my car. My buddy Robert lived in it with me. I'm in the driver's seat. He's in the passenger seat. The back seat's full. I would go to work. He would go get his hustle on. We'd make some money. We were trying to save money for an apartment. And I saw a buddy of mine I hadn't seen in a year since high school. And he had a house. Him and this woman rented this house. There's 4 bedrooms. They had 2 rooms. They had 2 empty rooms. So he offered to let us come stay. Now, Charleston, this guy is not what you think is stereotypical Christian, which is what I love about him. He worked at a Christian bookstore, total pothead. He was going to the store to buy 40s to drink. And then he would always go to church. And he was so happy. So happy. And I'll never forget, about a week after we lived there, he goes, hey, why don't you guys come with me to the young adult group, right? It's like the, late teen to 25-year-old group. And I'm like, yeah, cool. Okay, I'll go. We go to this church. I walk in. I remember once or twice going to this church with my grandma my whole life, for the only time I've been to church. And the altar, like, I called them the stairs. I don't even know what to call it, right? There's a giant 30-foot wooden crucifix in this church, St. Francis, right? So we walk in, and I can just feel moved immediately. My emotions start, right? And we walk in, and the pastor's talking to me. He's talking to me. And in that moment, I'm like trying not to cry because here I am. I'm this big tough guy wanting to fight the bullies, and I got this persona and I got this mask on and this image to maintain, but I'm feeling it. So he finishes. He's like, break out into little groups, 5 or 6, but don't sit with people you know. So I'm like, I don't have the safety of my 2 buddies that are there with me, Robert Morris, right? And we start talking in this group and everything's purposeful. I really feel that way, right? God, spirit, source, whatever your belief system is, it's all purposeful. And we start talking in this group, and this guy my age starts talking about like his trauma and some stuff that he went through. And so they were like, Walt, do you want to share? I was like, yeah. And I start sharing, I start crying. I can't stop crying, Charleston. And I like my chin's quivering and I'm crying and I just can't even really share. They all put their hands on me and prayed for God's strength. Man, I still get choked up thinking about this. And we finished. And something compelled me to go kneel down on the stairs, even though I had never even seen anybody do that. And I walk up, and my buddy Morris is over the top of me, and we all hit our knees, and he puts his arm around my shoulder, and I said, please, God, help. And man, I get choked up about this day. Tears, bro, tears down my eyes. 15 or 20 minutes of nonstop crying. I can't stop. Snip, snot, like that kind of crying. Boo-hoo crying. And I didn't realize it then, but it cleansed my soul. Like it just like this pain and this baggage I was hanging on to and being vulnerable in that moment allowed my soul to be cleansed, bro. Allowed it to be cleansed. And I didn't know it then, but I really gave my life over to God on that day. And we almost robbed a store after that, right? I was still fighting people. I was still wilding out. It wasn't like I just, the heavens opened up and I'm like, oh, and I'm just this angel of a man. I still had work to do. And so I went in the Navy. I met my wife her freshman year of college when I was new to the Navy. That's why we've been together 25 years this month, and we'll be married 23 years here coming up in July. I meet this amazing woman when I'm at this fork in the road. My aunt had loved on me and prepared me to accept love and be able to receive love in a healthy way at that point, because I didn't know how to love before. And, she's the next hero of my life. And so she would approach me with love. She would just love on me. I never felt like I didn't matter. I never felt like I wasn't worthy with her. She just was able to reach in my soul and unlock places that I kept hidden. And it wasn't like I didn't have setbacks, man. I got accepted to an officer program. I had great mentors, and I had to be vulnerable to accept them as mentors. And they poured into me, these men. And now I'm getting, love, and I'm getting respect, and I'm getting, just from these men, right? In a very pure way where they just wanted to see me succeed. And they had rough childhoods too. So they're like pouring into me. You're too smart for this. Like, man, like you should probably be doing A, B, and C, not being in the Navy. Like, man, you got so much talent, and they're pouring into me. And so I applied for an officer program and I got it. Why I've been disqualified submarines for asthma. All this is in the book. Disqualified submarines for asthma. Then I got disqualified from the officer program because of asthma, because at the time the Navy was downsizing, right before 9/11. And I was pissed. I'm like, can I ever catch a break? Man. So I'm just going to get my degree and I'm going to get out. And so I hit my 10-year point, reapply for officer candidate school, because now I have my degree. I had another inspirational mentor, Jesus, in that moment. The first guy's name was Corey. Had Jesus. Oh, he's like making me just get excited for what the Navy has to offer again. And I never stopped working hard. That's the thing, right? Even though I've had setbacks, I didn't let it stop me from taking steps forward. And I never let it sacrifice my character and my integrity and my work ethic. And here we go. And I get officer candidate school. And I still had some wickets to jump from a health perspective to get that and show that my asthma wouldn't inhibit me from being an officer. But it was after 9/11. So the Navy was upsizing again. So it wasn't a disqualifier anymore. Spent my last 10 years as a naval officer, had 2 beautiful children during that time. And I talk about this in the book too. My kids, those fears that you have of wanting to be a good father, the proudness of like having a kid. And with both of them, I put my hand over them and Stephanie, and I just prayed that God gave me the strength to protect and provide for them in the way that they needed. in the way that would make them amazing human beings. And this vision that I had of being married and having a couple kids, I mean, it was the last puzzle pieces to my life, and it completed my humanity. It really completed my humanity. And I got out, retired, went to corporate America, promoted 3 times in 4 years, doing really well, on the cusp of another promotion. Um, really built high performing team first environments where people love coming to work in. They get jacked up to be there, even though it was client servicing. People are on phones. Everybody, there's a buzz still on the floor. I'd walk out and fist bump Friday, 180 associates here, and I had 150 in the Philippines, and always present, always there, like always showing people they matter. And I can't tell. And a year after I got to this organization, this Fortune 3, we won Region of the Year for all the regions in the US in our business unit. So not because of me, because I just provided the environment for people to excel in, and it made me proud. And I'm seeing leaders grow, and I'm promoting people along the way. And I know I'm going to get my promotion at some point. I'm not even worried about that because I'm focused on others and helping them catapult their life and their legacy. And then I was left in this moment like there's more. I've been wanting to speak for 25 years, been talking about it for 25 years. And my wife, I had a breakdown from the stress of just corporate America and the constant, just 12 to 14 hour days. And in that moment, I had a choice. Like, am I going to let this knock me down? Like, it knocked me down. It took my mind away for about 2 months. Am I going to let it knock me down and stop me? Or am I going to grow through this moment I'm in today? And I talked to my wife, and my wife said, hey, I told you needed to write a book about your life for 20 years. She was like, and she doesn't work now, guys. I left 80% of my income on the table when I did this. She goes, screw it. Let's do it.
Yes.
Leave it. And I couldn't have done this without her support. Like, if she wouldn't have wanted me to do it, my marriage and my family is way more important than to cause unnecessary strain there. And she's like, let's just do it. Screw it. Like, it's not, no amount of money is worth it. I want my husband. And I want my husband back. That's that happy, joyful guy, not the guy who's stressed out all the time, living in that quiet desperation again. And I left corporate America 9 months ago. I finished my memoir. It's literally going on pre-sale next week, ebook. Official launch is the 23rd of February, so you can pre-order starting next week. And I've also done some speaking. I've got a speaking gig lined up at junior highs about character and integrity. We're going to also talk to parents and kids together about going through adversity and thriving. I've got some corporate gigs lined up on doing training on how to build high-performing teams. I was just asked by Marcus Black to go speak at the Embrace Your Ambition tour in June in Denver and share a stage. And so God is catapulting my life because I aligned the vision of what I wanted for the purpose of what my life is supposed to be until the day that I die. And now it's just like helping people overcome trauma and giving them those keys to living an extraordinary life based upon me living it and healing from it. And now pouring that into other people so they could feel like I do now.
Yes, it's incredible. It's incredible. I love it. I feel like there's so many people who have experienced trauma, that have experienced abuse, they've experienced all of these things, and they're in the midst of surviving.
Yeah.
And what they want to do is they want to go from surviving to just being okay. And what I love about your story is that wasn't in the cards for you. It wasn't in the cards for you to go from surviving to just being okay. Like, you didn't stop at the minimum standard. Just being okay is not enough, because you knew that you had more to offer. You realized your worth.
Mm-hmm.
And and I guess kind of a message for people that did not go through what you went through is for more people to understand there's so much of value in you being supportive and encouraging people. There's people who encourage you that didn't know your story. They were just good people that had your back. And so that's what we need to do as a community, is just be supportive, be encouraging, right? Living every day with kindness, optimism, positivity, and empathy. And that's what positioned you to realize I've got much more to offer than paying my bills and having a job. So I appreciate you so much. I have your information. It's scrolling across the bottom of the screen, your email address, as well as a link for a preview to your book. I'm excited about your book. I'm definitely going to get a copy. And then I'm just going to let people know that when the movie comes out about your life, I'm going to be telling people, hey, that guy was on my show, and I'm going to re-release this. I'm going to milk it. I'm going to milk this.
And I'll come back on. I'm going to come back on after that moment.
I love it. I'm so excited. I'm so excited because of not what you've accomplished, but the impact that you're going to have.
Mm.
And so I guess one thing that I'm thinking right now is that so many of us are in a position where we can do things, but we don't know how much impact we're going to have. Like, you can't even fathom right now. There are people who are not even born yet. There are babies who are going to hear your story 15 years from now, and it's going to change their lives. So I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for your perseverance, your strength, your resilience, your love, your honesty. And I guess my last question for you is just, is there anything else that you want to add as far as how we can get in touch with you, or last nuggets of wisdom? The floor is yours. Take it away, Walt.
Yeah, awesome. First, the nugget, right? Because this is important. Like, I'm looking right in this camera to somebody who's going to watch this and needs this nugget. Your history does not define your legacy, and you have the choice from where you started to not allow it to be where you finished. And the joy and the happiness that's waiting for you, the abundance that's waiting for you on the other side of running through that pain, is literally going to change your life. And so at the last chapter in the book, I give keys to living an extraordinary life. And there's 4 steps that I teach people that I personally went through. One day my wife goes, how did you really heal yourself? And I go, I don't really know. Like, I need to really give that some thought. How did I do it? And I had never looked at psychology books about it or anything. I never saw a psychologist. Well, I did for 3 months, and it wasn't helpful at 15 for me. My aunt was really the person who allowed me to speak my truth. And that's the first thing that I tell people. There's so many things that we stop ourselves from saying because we're fear of judgment, because we have shame of those things. And it's so important to speak your truth. You have somebody in your life that you could speak your truth to. You have people like Charleston, like me, like so many other people that if you feel like you don't have somebody that will allow you to speak your truth, there's therapists, there's counselors, like there's so many resources, guys. There's so many resources. And people teach things like put your pain in a balloon and let it go, like write it down and put it in a fire. Like, there's so many different tools and techniques you can use that get you to this point. But let me tell you what, there is nothing more healing and cathartic than speaking your truth. But speaking your truth requires the ultimate flex of strength. You see people shooting money and they're around cars, and they think that's a flex, right? That's power. That's not power. Power is rooted in vulnerability. Because whether your marriage is struggling and you got something to say to your spouse or your significant other that you've been holding back, whether you've had childhood trauma like I did and you're hanging on to it in the deepest recesses of your soul and it's locked away, all of those things are like poison. It's all poison to your humanity. But you have the antidote. It's right here. Speak your truth out loud. Take away the shame of the secrets, the burdens of the secrets that you've been carrying around your entire life. And every time you share those things, it gets easier and it gets easier and it gets easier. And next thing you know, it doesn't bother you anymore, because the shame that you hold, those pieces in your soul that fill you up in a negative way, you're able to strip those out and replace that with love, replace that with joy, replace that with abundance. And I don't mean money abundance. Speak your truth. And I also talk, and I'm not going to go into details about these. I also talk about 3 other things. After you speak your truth, you really have to accept your abuse or your trauma for what it was, no matter what kind of trauma it was, right? Whether it's war, whether it's childhood abuse, whether it's narcissistic relationships, whatever it is, you have to accept that trauma for what it is. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't run from it. Don't hide it. The next step is when you accept it, you got to acknowledge those emotions. Don't run from those either. I never used to cry. I thought it was like a badge of honor. I'd be like, if I ripped my shirt open, you would see an R for resilience. And I thought that made me strong to not cry. This is especially for men too. This is where women are so much more powerful than men. Men, stop hanging on to it thinking that it makes you tough. Stop the alpha male bullcrap that we hear where nobody cares, work harder. I hate that stuff because people do care. And
Yes.
people want for you what they have inside of them because they were able to be vulnerable. So the ultimate flex is that. So acknowledge those emotions. The next step I talk about is forgiveness. And boy, let me tell you, that was a doozy for me. And I didn't forgive anybody for anybody else but myself because I didn't deserve to live in that pain anymore. I didn't deserve to carry that baggage anymore. So when I forgave, when I realized hurt people hurt other people, when I realized the depths of abuse that the people that hurt me went through, and that they hated themselves so much because they wouldn't face that pain that they hurt me too. When I realized that, it gave me more empathy. You talked about it, the E and Cope, right? It gave me more empathy for them. It didn't make it okay. It didn't mean I wish it didn't happen. It gave me more empathy. I was able to let go of that pain and forgive. And it unlocked pieces of my soul I didn't even know it would. And the last thing is exposing your superpowers. You guys, like trauma gives you gifts. It gives you gifts of just, I am who I am because of the things that I went through. I wouldn't be able to stand here and talk to you, sit here and talk to you today without the things I went through. Charleston wouldn't be able to do the work and the coaching and talk about the things he talks about without the things that he went through. You wouldn't be able to do the things that you need to do in life without the things that you went through. But start looking at the superpowers you got so you can look out the windshield of life instead of staring in the rearview mirror. And if you look in the rearview mirror, you only allow that to give you rocket fuel at how far you've come. And so I don't care if you're 6, 16, 26, 66 years old. It is never too late to step into your power and your happiness. And look, guys, it's scrolling on the screen. You want to get in contact with me? You could email me there. Go to my website, waltmckinley.com. Book some time with me there. But definitely go to monstersinmyhouse.com. Sign up for the book teaser. It's free. You're going to get on the email distro, and I'm updating everybody up to the launch and up to when this goes to bestseller. And we're creating a tribe and a tribe of people that understand the movement of what sharing, speaking your truth does. Understand the movement and the power of somebody that needs to hear your story. They don't need to hear mine. They don't need to hear Charleston's. They need to hear yours. And your story is literally going to become the manifest for the rest of their life. It's going to save their life in a way that I can't reach them. So don't delay. Start today. Find somebody, speak your truth, and let that go so that you can step into this extraordinary life that's waiting for you. Charleston, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you. I love you for having me on.
All right, thanks to you, man. Love you, my brother, man. I haven't known you long, but the power, man, the connection we have, man, it's priceless. And I'm so appreciative, And then honestly, the powerful people that connected us as well, man. So
Yeah,
this is good. This is just the beginning, man. I feel like we got decades of doing great things together, my friend.
that would do.
Man, love you, my brother. Thank you, everyone, for just showing up for the comments, the viewers, and if you watch the replay, feel free to comment. And again, I just appreciate you, Walt. I appreciate everyone for watching and listening. And with that, have a great Friday, everyone. And until next time, it's Cope Life Podcast. I'm Charleston Gaines, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.